You're watching Classic Television, CKVR in Barrie. Tonight, Reform leader Preston Manning defends his special allowance.
He showed pretty good quickness on that play.
And the baseball scouts, the men who find the boys of summer. Saturday Reports with Paul Hunter.
Good evening. Reform Party leader Preston Manning has made no secret of his feelings about perks for politicians. He's against them. But tonight, the Reform Party leader is being criticized for accepting a perk himself. Manning admitted today that he gets a $31,000 annual allowance from the Reform Party. The CBC's Kelly Crow has the details.
He bills himself as the frugal leader of a frugal party. But Preston Manning came into the office today to face suggestions that he's not pinching pennies quite as hard as he lets on. It was front-page news in one newspaper. Manning collects $31,000 a year from party, the headline announced. Not the sort of news expected from a man who makes a great show of turning down the perks of public office.
No, it's not been secret, no. And we have a communication going out to our own members. It's essentially party business.
Manning says it's old news. He's been getting the allowance for several years. But it may surprise some Canadians, especially after Manning's very public rejection of a $60,000 government car and driver and his self-imposed 10% pay cut. It certainly surprised some Liberals. Liberal Party whip Alfonso Gagliano says Manning is not practicing what he preaches.
He is a leader that gives back what the government was giving to not only to him but to the other leaders, to say, no, I don't need that, I'll save taxpayer money, and he was getting back from another source. So that's what I say is hypocrisy at its best.
But the controversy did not throw off Edward Harper's aim. The Reform MP says the party wants Manning to have this money.
This is not out of the taxpayer's pocket. This is out of the party's pocket. And this is money to cover legitimate expenses as party leader.
It's not something we're trying to hide.
Reform MP Ian McClellan says the party is still breaking new ground here. It's talking about this, even though it's after it appeared in the media.
In the past, these kinds of allowances went on, and probably much more, but it was never something that was out on the table. In our case, it's out on the table, and people can make of it what they will.
This isn't the first time a party leader has received extra money from the party, but what's unusual here is that Manning has said he's a different, less extravagant leader, turning down the perks of office. For his part, Manning says he can only cut corners so much before his family starts to suffer. Kelly Crow, CBC News, Calgary.
Police in Buffalo, New York have arrested a man for threatening hockey star Alexander McGillney, the same man who helped McGillney defect to the United States almost 5 years ago. Sergei Pavlovsky is accused of trying to extort money from the Buffalo Sabres forward. Pavlovsky was charged with grand larceny and made a brief court appearance. McGillney told police that Pavlovsky approached him yesterday at this restaurant.
He asked him for $150,000 and told him that if he didn't give him the money, he was going to shoot him or stab him in his leg.
I try to become, just think as much as I can what I should say and what should I do,
Pavlovsky was nabbed last night. Police say he sneaked into the stadium where the Sabres were playing Hartford. McGillney wasn't playing officially because of the flu. At practice today, he said he's had little contact with Pavlovsky since defecting from the Soviet Union after the 1989 World Hockey Championships in Sweden. In Bosnia today, what's being described as a serious clash between the United Nations peacekeepers and Serb forces. The UN says it began when Serbs opened fire on some British peacekeepers near Magli. The fighting went on for 7 hours, ending when a Serb bunker was destroyed. There were no UN casualties. It's not known if there were any on the Serb side. Dozens of Palestinians were hurt today in clashes in the occupied territories. Some of the worst of it was in Hebron, the West Bank city where 30 Palestinians were killed in a massacre a month ago. Since then, a curfew has restricted the Arab residents of Hebron. The curfew has been lifted, at least partly, and young Palestinians were out in the streets today doing battle with Israeli soldiers. More than 20 people were sent to hospital after inhaling tear gas. Ukraine is about to begin its first election of the post-Soviet era, but tomorrow's vote may be marred by apathy and confusion. Nearly 5,000 candidates are in the running for the new parliament. Most are total unknowns, and many voters have lost faith that anyone can save the country from its economic freefall. The CBC's Celine Galipo reports.
There isn't much history of campaigning in Ukraine. In fact, this was the only campaign bus driving through the streets of Kiev today. Viktor Borkivsky is an independent candidate. He rented this bus in a last-minute attempt to gather support in his district. My chances are not bad, he says, but it all depends on the voters. But the voters didn't even know who he was. I've never heard of him, she says, and I'm not interested in these elections anyway. With nearly 5,000 candidates representing 38 parties running in this election, many Ukrainians feel the same way. They don't know who these candidates are, let alone which party they're running for, or on what platform. Daniel Dobrovolsky says out of 20 candidates in his district, he still has no idea for whom he's going to vote. I'll choose one tomorrow, he says, but I don't think the election is going to change anything. This was the best chance candidates had to make themselves known, debates on television. But the government controls the airtime. They were given only 5 minutes, hardly enough time to state their name and background.
Concerned with their economic
Analysts say the old communist guard purposely created the confusion to keep their jobs.
This allows the old nomenclatura, the powers that be, what we here in Ukraine call the party of power, to maintain its grip on power.
President Leonid Kravchuk predicts a splintered parliament. He says he will seek additional powers and even rule by decree if necessary. Tomorrow's election is only the first round. With so much apathy and confusion among voters, many districts are expected to have a runoff vote in 2 weeks. Celine Galipo, CBC News, Kiev.
Scientists have been riding the ice floes off Newfoundland. Their job? To count seals. They're working on a survey trying to find out if the harp seal population has changed. The results could affect decisions on the controversial seal hunt. Tonda McCharles reports on the survey and some people who are anxious for the results.
It's called the Front, a vast shifting icescape in the North Atlantic, peppered with millions of seals who come here annually to breed.
There's never been reported that there's been this many small patches or this much spread among the animals.
Researcher Gary Stenson coordinates aerial and on-ice surveys. This year, fisheries scientists were surprised to find not the usual 2 large patches, but at least 9 different smaller patches of harp seals.
The problem with counting adults is that the adults come and go off the ice.
It's a $600,000 census. They count pups, use a ratio of pups to adults to estimate the total herd. 4 years ago, scientists said there were 3.5 million seals. Many fishermen believe there are twice that now, feeding on depleted cod stocks and other species in the cod's food chain. There are calls for a controlled hunt, a cull of older seals, so biologists aren't the only ones interested in the 1994 numbers.
Has the population doubled? Has it tripled? Has it stayed the same? What actually is the population out there? Until you have those sorts of information, any discussion as to whether or not you should have a cull or not is not based on anything that's factual.
A lot is riding on the survey research, yet in spite of all the money and effort spent, in places like here in Twillingate, the science doesn't count for much. What does count is experience. The Troke family of Twillingate has sealed and fished for 5 generations. Captain Peter Troke, his son Jack, and his sons Gary and Hardy say they don't need scientists to describe the ocean's environment to them.
We noticed the weather patterns have changed, our ice conditions have changed, the migration of the harp seals the last 20 years has totally changed.
The Trokes suspect seals have a lot to do with the decline in codfish, and they should be hunted. But the Trokes say it should be a controlled, humane commercial hunt to supply markets now being developed in the Far East. It would provide welcome work here.
Gives me back my dignity and my way of life. And that's all you can ask for.
don't think we should look at the seals as a problem. Seals not a problem, seals a resource.
Whether the number of seals is indeed a problem, a simple fact of nature, or signs of a burgeoning resource depends on who you talk to. But the debate will no doubt be fueled by the 1994 SEAL survey, results of which won't be known for several months. Tonda McCharles, CBC News, off the Funk Islands.
This was the final day of the World Figure Skating Championships in Japan, and it was a very disappointing day for Canada's José Chouinard. The national champion was in third place going into the long program, but 3 was not her lucky number today. It was the number of times Chouinard fell during her performance. And the skater who wanted a medal so badly had to settle for 5th place. Meanwhile, Saria Bonnelly of France was presented with a medal she didn't want. Bonnelly won the silver, but at first refused to even stand on the podium. But she did, and then, after getting the medal, Bonnelly immediately took it off. She later told reporters, "This is not my medal." The gold medal went to Japan's Yuka Sato, and Germany's Tanya Shevchenko won the bronze. Well, hard as it may be to believe, baseball is back. The season starts in just over a week. This next story is about the world champion Toronto Blue Jays. But you won't recognize many of the faces because it's about the talent scouts, the unsung heroes whose job it is to find the on-field heroes of tomorrow. Ron Azawa reports.
If you want insight into the Toronto Blue Jays organization, this may be the best seat in the house.
Basically, you're just trying to jam a lot of players into your schedule.
Tagging along with Bob Engel.
Do you mind if we stand down in here somewhere?
No. He's a Blue Jays scout, one of over 100 out there looking for Blue Jays of the future. He goes anywhere a young prospect might be. High schools, junior colleges, universities.
He showed pretty good quickness on that play.
In his 21 years as a scout, he's seen over 4 million young players, countless cities and towns across the United States. 200 days of his year are spent living out of a suitcase, looking for that kid with that special gift.
He looks like he throws anywhere in the low to maybe mid-80s is an average fastball. That's a pretty good breaker ball right there.
He's married with children, but they understand that he's also married to baseball.
Way to look in there, Mike. Way to look.
At this junior college game just outside Gainesville, Florida, a second baseman catches his eye.
Pretty good play by the second baseman. He had to go to the glove side and right himself, come back, and he made a good lead throw in the double play, accurate and with some strength. We're fortunate to see that.
A little bit of an ego, I guess, but we think our scouts are a little bit better than the other scouts.
Executive Vice President Pat Gillick is the person scouts report to. He's the man who makes the decisions and is recognized as the genius behind the Blue Jays' success. And he is the first to praise the scouts.
Well, that's where I came from. My background is in player development scouting and more in scouting. And so I've been through a lot of the things that our guys go through day in and day out. It's not an easy job.
Although willing to pass on credit, the philosophy on finding young players is his.
We like guys who are good athletes that are able to adapt, to make adjustments. And then also we look for the people who have the proper mental makeup, the coachability, the things that you really need to really develop and become a major league player.
Good. How you doing? Right.
The Jays have 30 full-time scouts, 10 part-time, and 100 who get paid commission when they find a prospect. The budget for scouting is between $8 to $10 million. The average salary for a full-time scout is $40,000 a year.
I don't think it's for the financial reward, because certainly the financial rewards for scouting are not great, but it's the fact of finding a player, watching that player develop, and going through the organization and finally getting to the big leagues and maybe helping the Blue Jays, win a World Series. That's what it's all about.
Ron Azawa, CBC News, Gainesville, Florida.
And that's it for this edition of Saturday Report. For CBC News, I'm Paul Hunter.
BSI, Business Systems Improvements, an authorized Unitel agent for Central Ontario.
We constantly process information between offices, so when BSI explained how we could link all our